is certainly not the main story. It is worth discussing over and over again. So much philanthropy being generated by the likes of Paul, Richard, and all those that have had the privilege of participating in this event. As we take a 9-9-4 flop here, Chao-Hing Yang's first action with ace-10. He is ahead of Pantling, who, wouldn't you know it, is in another pot, Daniel.
Well, again, he's going to be the aggressor. He came in with a raise. You know, he's betting the flop, and now he's got lucky and hit the queen on the turn, and he checks, right? So
you've heard of Duck Dynasty. Now we're talking Pant Dynasty. Andrew Pantling himself of the Pantlings and his Pant fortune in here in this biggest buy-in ever event. Let's talk about these hands so far. Chao-Hing Yang, pre-flop, really has a choice that he could make differently. He could 3-bet this hand. What do you think about calling with the ace-10 out of the small blind?
I don't hate it at all. We're very early on in this tournament. We're super deep. His range is, I mean, he's definitely ahead of the range, and it'd be fine to 3-bet here. But I think it's okay to call when you're, like, ahead of the dude's range. You're often going to play a small pot here, and we keep in all the worst aces by not 3-betting. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like all that. If he 3-bet, I wouldn't have thought a thing of it. I would have thought it was totally reasonable and normal, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Pantling betting the flop.
Yeah.
It feels pretty natural with queen high and 2 back doors with the 9 of hearts out there.
Yeah. Should
he have any checks on this flop, or is this kind of a just always bet flop for the pre-flop aggressor?
I think you should probably have a few checks, but this is I would, for me anyway, this is a mostly bet flop because this is this is like a pretty orphan-y flop, right? Like if you don't have any piece of this, you got nothing going on. This is not a wet board in any way. So like we're just going to get a lot of folds, I think, in general. Now against our opponent, call from the small blind, he has a lot of medium pocket pairs and a lot of hands like he has, like king,
I'm
queen.
concerned about fold equity against this range when the small blind flats. It's usually like a kind of strong range. I mean, maybe Chow has a couple hands like, I don't know, Jack 10 suited with no backdoor that can fold.
Yeah.
But if he has a backdoor, he might turn that into a raise. That's kind of a good raising hand. Not really sure if Chow is the type of player to do that. We don't actually know anything about him. We couldn't find any information about him.
No
online.
hidden for him.
So we don't really know. But it's a bit of a precarious spot as far as getting check raised by some hands, and also there's a lot of showdown value in Chow's range that is better than our hand that's going to call. But with the 2 backdoors and the deep stacks, it feels pretty natural to just keep the pressure on.
Also, like getting check raised isn't that big a deal, right? We've got queen high and
just
backdoors only, like so we don't mind getting check raised in this spot. It's like much worse to get check raised when you have like 2 7s here and you're like you know, like you don't really have any good ways. You don't like any of your decisions from
right. Speaking of decisions, how about Pantling's one on the turn, checking back? I mean, I think Chow's decisions on the turn are very easy. Checking makes sense. Probably check folding on this card. It's a very bad card for ace-10 against the range.
Yeah.
A lot of players are going to find a bet here as Pantling. I think I like the check. Do you agree?
I think it's a little bit opponent specific. If we feel like our opponent is sticky enough to hang in there with all the medium pocket pairs, I like a bet. If we think that this queen, though, is going to just force a lot of them out, which I suspect it might.
Yeah.
I'm worried. I'd be concerned that it might. I like the check better. Also, this way we mitigate all the every time he's got. Now we have something to worry about getting check raised off.
Yeah.
By the way. Every time he's got trip 9s, we only lose 1 bet. We don't have to worry about it.
Or if you had like king queen suited with 2 backdoors, we're gonna lose less money against that by checking.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's mostly the only queen we're losing to, but still, that's a reasonable queen for him to have.
Right. So yeah, I think it's actually, although it looks a little surprising on its surface and kind of like he's being extra trappy, it actually seems kind of standard to me. I think it's a good check.
I think it's a perfectly fine check.
You're going to be saying, check, please. If you're at a restaurant and you hear about Nitrogen Sports, you're going to be like, I need to get home. I need to get on the computer. I got to go on Twitter. I got to find the Poker Guys pin tweet and use the link to sign up for Nitrogen because of the automatic overlay tournament, Jonathan.
Yes.
Just the sound of that. It's value. Leave your steak at the table, Johnny.
I mean, or play on your phone. Stay there and play on your mobile device.
That's fine. Finish the steak and play on the mobile device.
Okay.
Use the link, though.
Yeah.
You get access to our tournament, which literally always has an overlay. Get in there. Get you some poker.
Betting when he has nothing, all of a sudden he makes a pair and checks.
Well, just kind of playing cautiously just in case he was up against a 9 for Chao-Hing Yang, who came in from the small blind, and Yang, having hit the 10 on the river, is value betting.
Sure. I think it's more a case of when Pantling checks that turn, it's a little bit trappy. You know, he's trying to, win another bet from his opponent on the river. And this is, pretty gutsy raise here. Pretty, raising to 50,000 with just the queen. Most players in this spot would just call the river bet, hope the queen is good. But, Pantling looking to squeeze some value out of his opponent.
And I think he knows he's protected against a 3-bet from Yang, given that the straight has shown up on the end.
Yeah, well.
All right, I'm going to say this to start this river discussion.
Okay.
I don't mean it to be disparaging, but it feels like Pantling is playing Chow like a fiddle. It feels like a spot where Pantling's just like, I'm a better player than you. This is pure exploit. Sorry, man. I'm just taking this 50K. Like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Because, let's go chronologically. Instead of saying because, we're going to take a step back. We're going to go chronologically. Should Chow be betting this river? I know he rivered a 10. He has the best 10. But is that worth a bet, and a small bet at that?
You know, something you brought up in the podcast is that it's hard to think of worse 10s that Pantling has that he plays this way. Meaning if he has Jack 10 or even King 10, he's probably betting that on the turn a lot.
Yeah, it's a good card for those hands.
He might check them back a little bit, but he's going to have a lot of bets there. So it's hard to imagine we're getting value out of 10s very often. So now we're really targeting like hands like pocket 7s, pocket 6s, pocket 5s, ace king, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Are they actually calling if we bet? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, like
we check called the flop. Like, what are we supposed to beat here with our pocket 6s? You know?
Right. And if we're known as like the super wizard, maybe things are different. But I think Chow is probably a recreational player, and Pantling knows it. And I think this bet is pretty face up as like marginal value, trying to eke out a little bit of extra from this hand.
It seems to me like we just caught the perfect card to bluff catch with. Let's check. We've shown a lot of lack of aggression. This is a good card actually for Pantling to bluff if he had a hand that he didn't like right now.
Like
Remember,
7
he
high
button.
or something.
Yeah, he's got 7-6 suited or something like that. He opened the button and he's like, well, I'm obviously losing. And then that 10 comes. He's like, well, I can get you to fold maybe those medium pocket pairs if I bet here. I could size it up a little bit. This could work. Let's give him a chance to do that. It feels like we just make more that way.
Yep. And I think the reason I said the first thing I said is that, yes, I agree it should be a check call. But now that Chow bets this, I think Pantling reads it perfectly. He understands exactly where he is.
Yeah.
It's rare that Chow has a better hand than Queen Jack. And Pantling sizes it like this because he doesn't really respect Chow. Honestly, like this is such an obvious fold as Chow when Pantling makes it 50K. Like it's 30K more. Are you kidding me? This is playing like very rudimentary poker of like the size is small, so you have to call.
Okay, it doesn't have to be about respect. It could just be about understanding.
I know
levels.
that was being flippant. It was a joke,
okay.
But like
it was funny. But I just want to say, like, it doesn't mean he doesn't respect the guy. He could totally respect the guy and still make the play that he thinks is going to work against the level this guy's on.
Of course,
right?
it's the play that he has to make because he thinks it's the best expected value.
Yeah, and clearly it works perfectly.
But what I mean when I say he doesn't respect him is he wouldn't make it if he thought Chow was a good player.
Well, yeah, because he figured he's never getting called.
Yeah.
He'd have to size it up more or just call.
Right.
Those are his two options. Making it 50K is like impossible to get called by a 10, you would think, against like David Peters. David Peters may 3-bet his 10, but he's never going to call you with a 10.
Right, and we talked about this on our podcast. Ace 10 actually might be a pretty good 3-bet candidate here. I mean, like, we block 10s full, which is Pantling's most likely full house. That's pretty interesting.
I mean, I really believe Pantling is almost always betting queens full on the turn, even though it's super strong because all it takes is for Chow to have one of those 9s, and you're going to get huge, huge benefits. And you have to play for the big pot in this spot when you have a hand that strong, I think. So, and we block 10s full ourselves by having a 10 in our hand. We can have 10-9 suited for sure.
Sure.
Like, there's nothing weird about like, I would think that we have a lot more 9s in our range than our opponent, so we have more full houses in our range.
Yeah.
This just plays so much better as a raise than a call.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a call is the worst of the 3 options.
By a lot. I mean,
yeah.
I think a fold is probably the standard obvious play. And then if you want to be cool, you can raise.
Yep.
And both will work really well here.
Right. And part of what Pantling is doing here is not expecting Chow to have that play in him when he makes it 50K, right?
Or having it so rarely that it's effectively unimportant, right?
Right. I mean,
but I think you're right. I think he doesn't have
it. Just feels like Pantling's got more experience and he's showing it here. And
I mean, this is what happens all the time in poker tables all around the world, right?
Yep. Let's see what the solver had to say. I bet it's going to be a little weird because, this is all exploit here, but let's see what the solver says from his GTO perspective.
Cool.
All right, it's solver time. This was work done by Danny Sprung. On the flop, let's talk about Mr. Pantling and the Pants dynasty that he brings with him. Wants to bet his actual hand 81% of the time. Makes perfect sense to us, as those who listened know. The call seems rudimentary. We didn't even really look at the solver for that, but that's fine. For Chow on the flop, ace 10, pretty simple call.
Yeah.
On the turn, Pantling bets 65% of the time with his actual hand. We really liked the check back on the turn when the queen came. I suppose the solver is looking for value balance and needs to include this in the range.
I mean, if we're not betting top pair, but we are betting a lot of bluffs, the solver probably hates
Yeah.
that. So it's like we have to find some value. It makes sense that this would be one of those hands.
Ultimately, this hand might be one of the least valuable for use of the solver that we've
Yes.
done with the solver because it feels like pure exploit throughout
Mm-hmm.
from Pantling's perspective,
Agreed.
at least. But yes, it wants Pantling to bet 65% of the time with his actual hand. Of course, he checks back. So
I will say though, just because it feels like pure exploit doesn't like we get to see if it is.
yeah,
You know, we get to like compare it to something, so it's
True.
still useful.
true. The river is kind of interesting in that the solver always wants to raise Pantling's hand
Yes.
after Chow bets.
When it
which
bets that size.
It felt like kind of a fancy play rather than an always do this type of play, right?
Yeah, but with that 20K bet, it's like you got to raise,
Right.
man.
Speaking of the size, it wants to go bigger than Pantling went. It wants to 4x it rather than 2.5x it. Of course, this is not the solver playing exploit against a guy who Pantling has decided is price sensitive, is probably what's going on here.
Well, he's I'm thinking putting him on a 10 or some small medium pair spot, a marginal hand, and saying, I'm just going to price you in and force you to call. And 80K is not going to do that probably correctly, right? Because Chow isn't going to call with the right balance of hand, so he's got a minimum defense frequency or anything like that. He's just going to fold a lot. We think he should fold this.
Yep, we do. We actually that was our strongest thought in the hand was that Chow should fold this hand, or 3-bet it.
Oh my God, yeah.
But the solver is completely indifferent. It's totally fine with a call for Chow.
Mm-hmm. It says it calls about 2/3 of the time, but I think it's indifferent in terms of the expected value.
Yes.
Right? Of like a raise or a fold. I think in practice, as we're saying, like someone raises to this size on the river, and with this action, like as we're saying the whole way through, this can't be a call against anyone who knows. And if they know nothing about poker, you can call. Otherwise, what the hell? Okay, so that was like just Andrew Pantling being a good poker player against a guy who is clearly hasn't been around the streets as much, it seems. We liked a lot of Pantling's decisions. We think he just like showed his superiority at the game, which is, fair enough. There's going to be people who are better than you. Do you guys agree that these plays are what you want to see, though? Like, what do you think about some of these river decisions? Ultimately, Chow deciding to bet at all on the river, we thought was questionable at best. We hated his call. We liked Andrew Pantling's raise, but he could also raise more. You might also think, like, he shouldn't be raising. How do you really, in practice, get called? We thought it was a pretty bad call. So, what do you think? Let us know in the comments.
Please do, and if you want to discuss this hand, do it on Discord. There is a link in the description of this video that takes you to our Discord server where we will have a thread for this hand. Danny Sprung will post his solver work there along with other people chiming in on the old hand. We also have, fun poker talk in general over there. You can post your hands. We'll see you there.